All right, let's talk about tragedy. Now, you might think Shakespeare had the market cornered on tragic drama, but today we're diving into the work of John Webster. He was a contemporary of Shakespeare, but let me tell you, his vision of the world was, in many ways, even darker and more intense.
At the very heart of Webster's work is this one: single explosive question. What really happens when a person's desire for love goes up against the crushing force of absolute power? It's a conflict that fuels his most famous play, and, it's a theme that still feels incredibly relevant today.
Okay, so to really get Webster, you have to get his time period. We're talking about the Jacobean era. This is the early 1600s, right after Queen Elizabeth I. And while Shakespeare was also writing, Webster was looking at the world through a much bleaker lens. His world is often violent, cynical, and feels pretty morally corrupt.
So who was this guy, really? John Webster was an absolute master of the psychologically intense tragedy. His plays aren't just about bad things happening to people. No, they're deep dives into the minds of his characters who are twisted up by ambition, by jealousy, by obsession. It's like he's showing us not just what they do, but the dark, disturbing logic behind why they do it.
Think of his plays as these intricate, perfectly constructed traps. Webster creates these brilliant, complex characters, and then he just ensnares them in these suffocating webs of political scheming and personal betrayal. And the plots, they are shockingly violent. It all paints this picture of a world where moral decay feels, almost inevitable.
His two big masterpieces, The White Devil and The Duchess of Malfi, are both set in the corrupt courts of Italy. Now, for writers of his time, Italy was kind of the perfect backdrop to dissect power, revenge, and hypocrisy. And while The White Devil's amazing, it's The Duchess of Malfi that is really considered its greatest achievement. So for this explainer, that's the one we're going to break down.
All right, let's put this play on the operating table, shall we? By performing a kind of anatomy of a tragedy on The Duchess of Malfi, we can see exactly how Webster built his dark and totally compelling vision of the world.
So, the setup sounds deceptively simple. The play centers on a young, wealthy duchess who's been widowed. She's powerful, she's independent, but she makes one fateful decision. She decides to go against the explicit wishes of her powerful brothers and secretly marry the man she actually loves, a man who is, by the way, way below her in social status.
And this single act of defiance is like lighting a fuse on a powder keg. It sets off a catastrophic chain of events. And to understand why it was so explosive, we've got to meet the key players in this very deadly game.
Just look at how these motivations are on a collision course. On one side, you've got the Duchess. All she wants is autonomy, love, happiness. Pretty simple stuff. But against her, you have her brothers. The Cardinal, who is the embodiment of cold, corrupt power, and then her twin, Ferdinand, who is driven by this really disturbing, obsessive need to control her. And caught right in the middle, a spy named Basola, who is maybe the most complex character of all.
So it all starts here. The Duchess marries her steward, Antonio. In a world obsessed with bloodlines and status, you just can't overstate how radical this was. A noble widow was supposed to be a pawn in her family's political games. By choosing her own husband for love, the Duchess is basically saying, my life, my body, my choice.
And her brothers? Oh, they do not see this as a love story. For them, her choice is a stain on their family's honor and a direct threat to their control. They had forbidden her to remarry, and her defiance just unleashes their absolute darkest impulses, especially Ferdinand's. He just goes completely off the deep end.
So what do? They plant a mole in her court. That's Basola. And right away, the whole play shifts into this tense, claustrophobic thriller. It's all about surveillance and manipulation, as the Duchess desperately tries to keep her marriage and her children a secret from the world that wants to destroy them.
But yeah, in a Webster play, secrets have a very short shelf life. When her marriage is finally discovered, her brother's revenge is swift, and it is absolutely sadistic. The Duchess is put through unimaginable psychological torture before she's finally executed. It's a truly brutal punishment for daring to defy them.
And this comparison just lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, you have the Duchess's world, which is all about modern values, autonomy, love, personal happiness. And on the other, her brother's world, which is this rigid patriarchal system built on power, lineage, and total control. I mean, these two worlds were never going to coexist. They were destined to collide violently.
But look, this story is way more than just a family tragedy. For Webster, the Duchess's story was the perfect vehicle to explore all the big themes that he was completely obsessed with throughout his career.
Yeah, you can think of this play as a pressure cooker for all his biggest ideas. The corrupting influence of power is everywhere. Ferdinand's jealousy becomes this terrifying, monstrous force. And at its core, the play is just a blistering critique of a social system that tried to control women's lives. And all of it is just steeped in this dark, gothic imagery of death and madness.
You know, a critic once summed up his work perfectly, describing it as taking place in a world where human suffering and treachery reign supreme. And that just hits the nail on the head, right? Webster doesn't give you easy answers. He just forces you to look at the worst parts of human nature without any kind of moral comfort.
So you might be thinking, wow, this sounds incredibly bleak. Why on earth are we still studying and performing John Webster 400 years later? What makes his dark vision last?
Well, the answer really comes down to his sheer skill. Webster's language is just stunningly poetic, even when he's describing horrible things. It has this quality that people call a macabre beauty. And his characters, from the noble Duchess to the conflicted spy Bassola, they are so psychologically rich that they feel completely, terrifyingly real.
Ultimately, Webster's legacy is that of a challenger. He put a female hero on stage who demanded a level of personal and sexual autonomy that was just shocking for its time. By questioning who gets to have power and exposing the rot that can lie underneath it, he created this powerful, unforgettable kind of tragedy.
Which really leaves us with one final thought. The Duchess of Malfi fought for the right to choose her own life, her own love, against a system that was designed to crush her. And it makes you wonder, 400 years later, in our own world, who gets to write the rules for love and power? And what happens when we dare to defy them?